And welcome to the Neo News Today podcast. I'm your host, Dylan of Neo News Today. On episode 40 of the NNT pod, I had a chance to sit down and speak with Tyler Adams, a co-founder of COZ. This is the second half of a two-part interview series with Tyler, where previously we discussed Moonlight and the Vivid identity solution. This portion of the podcast will focus on the COZ developer community in the Neo ecosystem. In this segment, Tyler and I talked about the early days when Neo was Antshares and the role that COZ played, how the community has evolved over time, and projects that have sprung forth from COZ. We also touched upon the recent rebrand and announcement of new COZ products, and what Tyler thinks is an important aspect of Neo 3. So I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Hey guys, Dylan with Neo News Today. We are sitting down for part 2 of our conversation with Tyler Adams, and this time we're going to be talking about his role as a co-founder in COZ. So Tyler, we had a brief introduction from the podcast that we previously recorded for the previous episode, so I just kind of want to jump right into this. COZ is one of the longest running development communities in the Neo ecosystem. For those who are new to Neo or even to hearing about COZ for the first time, can you share a bit about the developer community's origins and its journey from then until today?
Sure. That's definitely more than a 20-minute story, I'll tell you that, but I can give a brief. So COZ started over 3 years ago now, actually, in the Neo ecosystem. It was Antshares at the time, with a bunch of people who were just really interested in learning more about the Antshares platform and project. There are people ranging from developers to people doing business development and marketing. A lot of the people that actually are considered like thought leaders in the ecosystem now were part of that group. We look at not just core COZ, but you look at the O3 Origins, even Neo News Today, Phantasma. NOS, like a lot of these projects have that kind of origin story or a very similar origin story. So it started out with a bunch of people getting together. Nash, I should mention Nash also, since half of the founders of Nash are COZ, half of the COZ founders are on Nash. It really started with just a bunch of people interested in understanding the platform, right? It started out with documentation translation and actually just documentation creation in general. And then very quickly migrated into two primary areas, one being product development, where people were working on the Neon wallet to get that up, because at the time there wasn't actually any way to interface with the Neo blockchain if you were using Mac OS, for example, and with Linux, the experience wasn't that amazing either. So getting Neon Wallet up, projects like NeoBoa for Python smart contract development, NeoPython, NeoScan, Neon.js, which is our JavaScript SDK. A lot of these projects, right, are building. We very quickly developed a relationship with Neo, and they provide us with an endowment to scale the ecosystem. In addition to the development, I mentioned there are two different prongs. We also provided a lot of support for the ecosystem growth, specifically revolving around like community engagement and outreach, which is how a lot of these like workshops started showing up for how to build on Neo and at the time Antshares. A lot of the documentation, things like the community Slack and moderation of that, the subreddit, eventually the Discord. So we kind of created that Discord to migrate people out of the Slack. Even early days, like the Twitter accounts, the social, like and the other various social media accounts like Instagram and Facebook and things like that. So that was kind of the other component to that. As that matured, we transitioned into kind of a more pure product development group. Our projects matured. We've also run a number of competitions which have seeded projects in the ecosystem. And we've also shed off a number of really large projects. Probably the four most notable ones would be Nash, Moonlight, NOS, and Phantasma. So we've done a lot of different things in the ecosystem to host the growth there. And then for the past, and I know it's funny, there's an interview from NCA that was commenting about how we kind of been in the background, not very active in social media. And I'm taking pot shots at Edge right now, but assuming he's going to listen to this. For the past year and probably a year and a half, we've been working on Neo 3 stuff, which is why we haven't been in the community forefront with a lot of social media engagement and ecosystem engagement, with exception of Hal, who is perpetually engaged in the community. So last week we kind of said, you know what? We actually do exist and we're very active in the community. We're just not, we're not self-promoting. So it's probably time to push the baby bird out of the nest and release our rebrand. And then I think we did 4 products announcements last week.
Totally. So I kind of want to lean into that now. Last week, COZ announced a slew of new products, and we'll go into a little bit more details about each, so keep that in mind. But An updated block explorer, Python tooling, a Neon wallet teaser, a new website, and just overall a total rebrand. So maybe you can just give us a brief little glimpse into how long these releases have been in the works, and maybe which new release you're the most excited about, and then we'll ask a few questions about some of them.
It's like asking to play favorites with your children.
You have to choose one.
Yeah. It's like the battle royale of projects. So I think depending on the projects, there are some projects that have now been in the works for over a year. One of the products, which is actually built into another one of our projects that we've already announced, but we haven't announced this core project that we've been working on. That core project has been in the works now for 18 months. We've been working on that for a really, really long time. And I'm very excited about it. I know the development team involved in it is very excited about it. There will be some new product announcements probably in the next 2 weeks or so associated with that, but I'm not going to release anything here. Looking at that's probably the longest running new product for Neo 3 that we've been working on. Regarding the projects that we released, one of the big things that we did that is, I'm very relieved, it's like pulling a thorn out of my foot, is, and I'm sure for a lot of the Python developers out there too, it provides some clarification, is the clear segregation of the NeoPython suite. So historically, this has been, there's been a lot of confusion there. So we've effectively split the NeoPython suite, which was previously sort of one project, kind of 2 projects in reality, into 2 unique products, which is Neo or Mamba. And Mamba, if you're familiar with the existing COZ offering, it's similar to Neon.js, but for Python. So it's a full-featured blockchain SDK in Python. So if you're a Python developer and you want to interface with the Neo 3 blockchain, that is the tool for you.
Why did you choose to rebuild the NeoPython suite from scratch for Neo 3 and change their identity?
So I think the branding is probably the first answer to that question. Historically, so we have, and this goes to the other product in the NeoPython suite, which is BOA, which is our smart contract compiler. So people can now write Neo 3 smart contracts in Python natively to be transpiled into bytecode. There's a historic relationship, and if you can get Tom Saunders on here for a podcast, I'm sure he can provide a really great answer for this. But historically, the smart contract compiler and NeoPython had the SDK had a really, and full node originally had a really close binding together as one project, and then two projects, and then one project, and it was very ambiguous. So it was very important for us to split the two apart from a branding and just really clearly define these are two unique things, where some people may only need one or the other, to be honest. From a rebuild perspective, we don't, in engineering, you don't really get very many good opportunities to say we're going to start over on something. That's like a unicorn. So with Neo 3, we've really tried to take advantage of that wherever possible. And I think this was a really good opportunity as a team to take a lot of our lessons learned from the Neo 2 experience and incorporate them into the Neo 3 experience. Like I said, we've been doing this for over 3 years now. We know, and we've done dozens of workshops. We know exactly how people want to use these tools, and why. So for us, one of the big changes here is for NeoPython, NeoMamba specifically. The NeoPython project for Neo 2 is actually a full node first and an SDK second. So you can run a Neo 2 full node in Python, right? That's the primary functionality of the Neo 2 version, and then it's an SDK second. For Mamba, it's actually it's an SDK first, because the primary goal for us is to get people to use interfacing with the Neo blockchain itself without necessarily having to run a full node themselves. So that's the big change for that platform. For Mamba, there's a lot of additional features that we wanted to bring in, and the other thing discussing the rebuild is that is kind of the infrastructure piece, where on a lot of these projects, the team is very different from the original team working on them. We have some people who have been in COZ for a long time, but carrying over a lot of the processes from somebody who's no longer directly engaged on the project potentially introduces a lot of overhead that we didn't want to bring with us into the new experience. Now, continuing on through the projects, and I'll be quicker on these other ones. Dora is our new Explorer platform. And there are a couple key features that we've added to this new Explorer, which are immediately available to people. I think the biggest one is that contract invocations over the last 24 hours. Architecturally speaking, the platform is also completely different, which is, I think people are noticing how quick it is. It's like a lightning fast blockchain Explorer. I think over the next few months, people will see how we leverage those architectural changes to really provide some pretty cool value to the ecosystem that it doesn't really exist in many projects globally in the DLT ecosystem. So I think, I guess it's an Explorer now. It'll have some crazy features probably over the next 3 to 6 months, along with Neo 3 release.
Without being maybe too specific, because it sounds like a lot of these are still in the works and you don't want to play your hand too quickly, are there any ideas for what some of these new features for the Dora Blockchain Explorer might look like?
I think, so I think in the short term, we'll be seeing a lot of analytics features, which really give insight into what's going on the platform. And I know that for you as an evangelist in the Neo ecosystem, just the contract invocations have already been very helpful for you, smiting FUD about Neo being dead, right? So there will be a number of new features which they may not directly address that question, but they will provide a lot of value in terms of understanding how the chain is operating. I also think, people can probably expect some really interesting functionality regarding Neo 3 that, obviously doesn't exist between both our Preview Explorer, which we have right now, and then Dora. One of the unique features that also is in this Explorer is the ability to decode events and notifications from smart contract invocations. That's very helpful for developers as a tool or utility as well that we've added there. Just in this initial release, I think that's probably as far as I'm going to go on that. One thing that people should also note is that all these products have a new look and feel. Along with last week's product releases, we also announced finally our rebranding officially to COZ Inc., which will really solidify, in collaboration with NGD Seattle, the kind of the Western initiative or front for the Neo ecosystem. I guess the last thing we announced is then the mobile wallet, which will partner with the Neon desktop wallet to really provide a complete experience within the COZ and Neo ecosystem.
Are there any new features that are exciting that have been added to the mobile wallet that you can talk about?
No.
Cool.
It will be available soon. And actually, I should say, and this is for people that I interact with regularly who hear that a lot, it will be ready soon. There are a number of really interesting user experience features in there. The team has really done a pretty remarkable job in terms of UX and how we need to build like a mobile experience that is going to carry blockchain, not just the Neo ecosystem, but like blockchain in general, from a user experience perspective into the next kind of 5 to 10 years. I think it's a really well done application from a user perspective, and I think people will be very happy with it.
Awesome. You've been in the Neo ecosystem for more than 3 years. You helped write the NEP5 smart contract, and you've contributed to so many discussions in these past 3 years. I'm curious to just hear from a sage such as yourself, what are some of the ways that you've seen the Neo blockchain and ecosystem in general evolve over time?
Oof. In a couple minutes, huh? The first thing I'll comment is I'm definitely not a sage. I'm more of like a miser, I think is probably the better term. How it's evolved. I think the biggest thing that I've seen change is the realism of the ecosystem. And I remember us having this discussion actually at DevCon 2, right? Where DevCon 2 was like, let's show real stuff. Where DevCon 1 was like, let's show what we want to, what we believe in. I think the community is very hardened and resolute in that regard. And I think that also speaks to the projects in the ecosystem and the Neo team itself. I look at the working relationship with the Neo team and what that looked like before and how that looks now. It's definitely matured into it's a machine, right? It's not I think of it as like and this isn't to Neo, this is the entire ecosystem. It's like the starry-eyed like teenager, joining the army or the military, right, to go to war because of the glory of the war or whatever. And like, this is like after World War I or World War II, like you've served and you've been through it. And now it's like the veterans are here, like making progress, like actually churning out products, actually delivering on goals and expectations, actually building real material relationships, and providing value. And that goes to the community, like the non-developer community as well, right? I think the expectations from the community on these projects is much greater, and more tangible. People don't want they want the vision, but they also want the results. They want to see the proof of delivery. And that also goes for the projects themselves, and Neo especially, like they're providing that and ensuring that happens. So I think that's really where the biggest change has been, I think, to me, is that we're a well-oiled veteran machine now. Like a lot of the people, and I mentioned there are a lot of new people in COZ. When I say new, what I actually mean is like 1 to 2 years. Like there are still a lot of people in COZ that have been around since the very beginning too. And that goes for a lot of these projects in the ecosystem as well. These people have worked together now for a long time under, in some cases, very stressful situations. And you kind of build that camaraderie, that like band of brothers type of relationship with these people. Use a lot of military analogies there, but yeah, I think that's the big ecosystem change over the past 3 years. I think, I don't know. I think it's good. The relationships are definitely really strong. I think, we've known each other now for, it feels like 10 years in blockchain time, right? You build up these relationships with people where you just work well together or better together. And I think that, in systems engineering, you kind of learn like the interface is always where things break. And when you think about like the relationship between people, that's the same thing, right? And having those solid interfaces, like knowing, oh, we're having an issue with this, I need to go message this person, that kind of thing. Those are very well defined already. That infrastructure, that nervous system is there, and it's very healthy and thriving. So I think that's probably the big thing. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, I mean, just from your experience, it's awesome to kind of have that perspective and cognizant of our time. I'll wrap up with this last question. And you gave us a history from where we were from Antshares until today, and how you've seen the ecosystem evolve. From your perspective on Neo 3, what element do you think will really hit the mark with the next iteration of the blockchain?
I'll toot my own horn and say identity, but that's because I live in that space all day, every day. I think that's a very understated requirement for a lot of these tools to expand. I think that's going to be a pretty critical feature in terms of adoption. I think, especially in terms of onboarding people who are everyday users who may not even be aware that they're using blockchain. I think that'll be huge. I think, I don't know, I see cross-chain as being like cross-chain features as being really kind of a necessity. I look at the way that the internet is structured, and architecturally speaking, these cross-chain protocols are what we're talking about when we talk about the internet, right? Because really what you're doing is you're interfacing with a lot of different platforms and technologies which have their own distinct needs and features, right? And without that cross-chain functionality to lace them all together, you don't really have that internet, right? Or that smart economy kind of a thing. So I think cross-chain is probably, if I'm not tooting my own horn, that's probably the big thing that we need to look for in the next, 3 to 5 years, probably. That'll be what really makes or breaks blockchain, I think.
Tyler, I feel like there were a million more questions I could have asked you, but we only have so little time. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, taking it out of your very busy schedule to be a part of the Neo News Today podcast. It was absolutely awesome to catch up with you.
Yeah, it's always fun talking to you.
Well, what did you think of that conversation? I thought it was really interesting to learn more about how Tyler believes the Neo community, both developers and non-developers, have amalgamated over the past few years and become more realistic in their expectations. It was also cool to learn more about how engineers don't get very many opportunities to rebuild products from scratch, and how COZ used lessons learned in Neo 2 to rebuild the NeoPython experience for Neo 3. Lastly, it was interesting to gather Tyler's insight about identity and its important role in connecting various blockchain networks to build something similar to an internet for the smart economy. To keep up to date with the latest in the Neo ecosystem, visit www.neonewstoday.com. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Apple iTunes, and or Spotify, and leave a 5-star review if you feel that others should hear our content. Every subscription and review helps others learn more about the Neo News Today podcast and the Neo ecosystem. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Neo News Today podcast, and we look forward to catching you next time.